This is a highly manipulated market, and it reacted obviously to the most recent headlines, almost ignoring some of the other headlines, like you mentioned OPEC, right? So OPEC Plus has intimated at this point that they're going to keep the cuts. They're not planning to raise production. Interestingly enough, the floating storage, which is how much oil is being out there in the sea, is at 2.75-year lows right now. The deal that the U.S. made with Venezuela, well, all of a sudden there might be some issues going on there, so that may not work out. And the idea that the U.S. was supposed to supplant their reserves by buying more oil at around $70 a barrel, well, that may or may not happen. But most importantly, people seem to forget that commodities by nature are incredibly volatile. To have 20% moves up and down when they're in vogue, as they have been for the last couple of years, is typical. So going back to oil, I think $72 a barrel right now to me feels like a bottom. Actually, interestingly enough, you saw just now that it showed it was up a little bit. I'll be watching to see if $72 a barrel actually holds. It's about the level where it started to take off earlier in the year, or I should say over the summer. And I still believe that demand, as we're going into a holiday season here with a projected 55 million people either driving or flying Thanksgiving, and of course the demand that they're talking about in the United States could continue to stay low, but it may not be as bad as they think. A frigid winter that people are counting on. There's so many factors that can bring the oil market back up. So in a good scenario, if it holds around here, probably would give a nice sigh of relief for the Fed. But I would watch the technicals, and if we can hold 72, get back to 76, and get back over 80, then watch out. We're once again having some issues. And the Middle East, by the way, that was another reason why, since things have not escalated into Iran as people had feared, well, does that mean that will never happen? We don't know that either.
Not to go a little bit sideways, I've got to ask you, what's going on with OJ right now? You've got the futures at record highs. Now, I'm a fan of OJ as much as anyone else, but this is, if we're talking about, the downside pressure from the traders coming for oil, this is one of the most fierce bid-ups I've ever seen.
It's startling. It's actually outperforming everything. I mean, you name the most explosive stock you can think of. This is up 270%, I believe, at all-time highs, all based on crop conditions. There was some kind of a disease that hit the crops, and weather. I mean, I haven't even mentioned weather yet, because weather is still a factor. I mean, let's take a look at soybeans right now, which everybody counted for dead because the U.S. crop was so good. Well, U.S. crop was so good, but Brazil and Argentina are still having tremendous drought conditions. And on top of that, China, which they didn't think would have a huge demand, all of a sudden came in and bought a lot of U.S. soybeans. And so that's another one that we have to keep an eye on. After we're seeing OJ go up and cocoa going up and live cattle going up. So this whole notion of CPI and inflation's over and food prices have come down a little bit, I think is looking at it with blinders. I think food inflation and weather not necessarily cooperating, and OJ is just one classic example of what can happen to commodities when they go parabolic and catch people off guard.